Hi everyone, thank you for coming. Sun has very kindly allowed me to monopolise the microphone for 30 to 60 seconds. My name is Kate Talbot. I am a board member for the Alliance of Women in Media's Southern California chapter, and we are sponsoring this fantastic panel this afternoon, so really delighted to see so many faces here. We're a non-profit, member-based organisation that helps people in the media industries connect, network, further their education and become inspired about what their career can really evolve into. I've left some flyers on the front here, and we are at booth 7 over in the sales area if you want to come past and hear some more about it. And that's it from me. I'll let these wonderful women take it away.
Thank you.
Well, I think we lost our moderator, so maybe we just go into intros. I'll take over. Yeah, she went to get water. Okay, hi, I'm Amy Kim. I am the co-founder and president of Lifeboat Productions. We're a full-service third-party production company based out of North Hollywood. Most of our company's productions are high-end digital scripted series, so our partners in the past have been Sony Crackle, Microsoft, Hulu, Netflix, full screen. So we've been in business about 4.5 years now, and yeah.
I'm Karen Tankoff. I'm a feature producer, and I work in both animation and live action. My first background was in live action, then I went into animation, and now I'm doing both, developing projects independently for both media.
Hi, I'm Laverne McKinnon. I'm the head of television for Denver and Delilah, which is Charlize Theron's production company. We have 2 series at Netflix, a drama and a comedy that I'm executive producing called Girl Boss, which is based on the book by Sophia Amoruso. I'm also an executive coach. I work with writers, directors, folks from Silicon Valley, and I've found that in my work as an executive coach, it really crosses over into my work as a producer as well.
Hello. Is this on? Is this on? Testing. Testing. I'm Karen Bailey. I'll be known as Karen 2 since Karen 1 is right there. I am Senior Vice President of Stars Entertainment, overseeing scripted programming. We don't delineate between comedy and drama, so we just do it all. We have multiple shows currently in production at our network. I directly oversee Outlander. The white. Oh, thank you. We have some Scottish fans in the house. I like that. As well as The White Princess, which is in production now. It's the sequel to our series, The White Queen, and The Missing 2, which is another limited series taking off of our successful Missing 1, which is co-production with the BBC.
And I am Shannon Keenan Demers, and I come from the unscripted side of things. I work for a company called Tremendous Entertainment, and we do a wide variety of unscripted for all different networks. Some of our shows that you might have heard of, we do Bizarre Foods with Andrew Zimmern for Travel Channel. We're going into our 10th season on that. I got a thumbs up back there. Thank you much. And we also have a spin-off of that. We do a show called Ghost Asylum for Destination America, so we do a lot of ghost hunting. We've got a show called For Pete's Sake, which is with Holly Robinson Peete on OWN. And we recently won an Emmy for a show we do on Saturday mornings for ABC called Rock the Park. So we just do a wide variety of programming, and we're based in both Minneapolis, Minnesota, and here in Los Angeles. I'm based here in Los Angeles.
And so, Shannon, we have to get you at some point to tell at least one story from Ghost Asylum, because we had met for a few minutes before the panel, and
'tis the season.
with Halloween coming up, her stories were truly chilling.
Yeah, it's a fun genre to be a part of. If any of you have ever had the chance, it's a weird world, but it's fun.
And so I apologize. I'm the moderator. I'm also the water carrier, so I had to go get water from my panel so that they didn't faint up here on stage. But my name is Sunjan Young, and I'm an investment banker. I'm a managing director at a mid-market firm called Headwaters MB, where we do mergers and acquisitions, advisory, as well as private equity and debt capital raises for companies, and I run the digital media and internet practice. So thank you all for joining us. I think we've got a great group of panelists, and hopefully we'll have a pretty interactive discussion about women in the industry, developing film, television, and OTT about women. And as Victor Harwood, the Digital Hollywood organizer, likes to put it, a golden age in Hollywood and indie production. So we have a series of questions that we'll use as the basis for discussion. And then if people have questions as we're going along, please feel free to raise your hand, and then we'll also leave some time at the end. But just to get a sense of who's in the audience, I see we do have a good mixture of men and women. It's not just women, but how many are in the independent film industry? Show of hands. How many are on the more traditional established studio side? How many theatrical? How many television? How many just pure digital? Okay, so we've got a great cross-section. Educators? All right. Investors or finance people? Okay, that makes two of us.
We'd like to talk to you afterwards.
You can have your own line on the side. So to kick it off here, it seems like there's an explosion of new content for the TV and film industry right now for women or about women. Do you agree or disagree? And if you can give examples which support your view, that's even better. Who wants to kick it off?
I can kick it off.
Karen, too.
Karen 2 from STARS. There has been an explosion. In fact, it's one of the focus points of STARS' current programming is we went into co-production. I'll just say our original programming, by comparison of a lot of other premium networks, we haven't been around. We haven't been doing it that long. So there's been a while of having to sort of find your footing and find out who your audience is and find out what your audience wants. A couple of years ago, almost 3 years ago, we went into a co-production with the BBC on a little show that we thought, this will be great, sort of high-level, sort of interesting historical drama programming called The White Queen. And we loved this. We loved the show. We thought it was going to be a great show. It's a limited series, and it would get some attention. It went off the charts for us as far as our female programming. Our female programming on that particular, the numbers on that particular show tripled from the time it aired to the time the 10 episodes finished from just the female demographic. So we're like, wow, we've really hit something. Premium programmers need to focus on women, strong women central character programming. And it was because of the success of that we so heavily pursued Outlander, because Sony had just announced that they were bringing it out to pitch to networks, and we aggressively went after that show, not just because of the showrunner Ron Moore being fantastic and having worked with some of our execs before, but also we knew the power of that book. We knew what female demographic it would attract. We knew that if we hit it right and hit the pulse right, that female protagonist stories could get into a premium level and hopefully explode, and it's worked really well for us. So we're going to continue that as part of our programming drive because women want programming for them, and they want their voices heard, and they don't want to be secondary characters. Okay.
Yeah, that was a great example. Anyone else?
I would say it's a little different in the unscripted world, in that a lot of what I'm hearing when we're going out and trying to pitch and sell is that everything is kind of a 50-50 mix of viewership. It's kind of rare these days, I think, in what I've found, at least in the programs we do, that it skews female or skews male, with the exception of Paranormal, which oddly skews very female. But so we have a little bit different of a situation. We have a few shows that skew very directly female, but for the most part, it seems like a lot of the networks are going for that 50-50 split, which I find kind of interesting, that they aren't skewing a little bit more one way or the other. It's kind of been a shift over the last couple of years.
And Karen Bailey, with Outlander, did you see any movement in the demographics or the statistics you were seeing around female viewership?
Yeah, I mean, Outlander skews predominantly female. The men will come along, and lots of spouses have been told that you have to be there Sunday night to watch the show. So we do have a strong demographic, a strong, heavily skews toward women. I think probably much like what you're saying, it's the 50-50 drive. Networks have traditionally, and especially premium networks, have sort of always programmed for men. So the shift is happening in that if you can just pull the percentage up just a little bit, it's already, we currently now have 3 times more programming for women than we ever did. But that's because we had none before, specifically geared for women. So I think that shift is happening. And, statistics, people in marketing will probably can validate this. Statistically, women make the programming decisions in the home.
Yep.
They decide what TV to purchase if you're buying TV, if it's OTT. Women typically make that decision. So I think it's a natural migration. But I think the difference is our female audience is now getting very vocal, which is great. And they're speaking up to say, we like this, we want more of this, and we don't want to be supporting characters or just seen through the eyes of another male character. So it's been, that Bechdel test shift has been happening for a while.
Yeah, no, that's great, because just in my mind, traditionally, I've thought programming for women, that's only Oxygen.
Yeah.
Or the Today Show, and that's not true.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
I can jump in on, in the independent film world, I would say it's not quite, it's not a particularly rosy picture. However, I think that all the discussion and the attention, and I want to give a shout out to Gina Davis and the institute, her institute on gender, I would say it wrong, gender and media, on the issues of gender and media, and bringing attention to how few women there are behind the camera and the disparity on screen. The Institute's done an excellent job. I'm not part of the Institute at all, by the way. I'm not plugging for them. I just think that it has helped create an industry-wide discussion about disparity. And there have been a lot of organic approaches to that disparity of women coming forward and saying, well, maybe I should direct a film. And finding general receptivity. The challenge is it still meets with the ultimate economic challenge of getting any independent film made, which is ultimately casting dependent. So I know, we all have innumerable female colleagues who will make excellent films, who have written excellent films, who will be great directors and are great directors, but there's still a bottleneck around the idea of talent attaching themselves to lower budget independent projects. So I think the willingness is there, and the philosophical openness is there, and our male colleagues seem completely on board with this, as much as it's just hard to get independent films made, period. So I think it's maybe a little bit different than television in that regard.
Yeah, I think that because we produce a lot of stuff in digital, I mean, when we first started, because there was an international sales component to the series, it was skewed very male, horror, thriller, action. These days, though, I mean, it's really empowering. We've got 2 female directors in right now prepping series, which is great. Writer-creators that are females as well, too. But you've started to see the shift because there's so many more buyers, more distributors, and they're looking for this female content. And it's nice that in digital there's an opportunity because, newer filmmakers get to take those risks. There's not the huge costs and risks that come with independent films. But for in digital, it's definitely been a great place for females to kind of get their foot in the door and to make their art.
And what about at the executive ranks? I mean, I think we're hearing a little bit of color about different sectors of the industry generally, but do you think things are beginning to change at the executive ranks at all?
I'll jump in on that one. I was at CBS for 10 years, and then I was head of programming at Epix. And I have to say in my career, I've been really fortunate where I've never experienced a bias because I'm a woman. And now as a producer and meeting with studio and network executives, I actually feel like that I'm meeting with more women than I am with men. And so I don't know necessarily if it's like more opportunities or it's just not something that I've personally experienced.
Yeah, I've had that same experience in unscripted world. I mean, I've worked for companies that have been run by men, companies that have been run by women, companies that have been run by both. But I would say, what? Oh. Sorry.
Very polite crowd.
Right now, I work for a company that's all women, in all the top positions, and that wasn't necessarily an intentional choice. It was just, they were the most qualified people for the job. And when we pitch, we mostly are these days, I feel like, pitching to women. So I've had a very similar experience that you've had. Yeah.
And are there any particular qualities or characteristics that you think help women succeed, particularly at the executive ranks?
I mean, I think listening to Laverne, I think an approach. I mean, I think that oftentimes it is a male-dominated world, but I don't think I've ever actually thought of myself as being in a male-dominated world either. I think I'm aware of how, I come across as a woman in certain situations, and I'm very conscientious about emails and emotions, because you don't want to be labeled as an emotional person as a female in this business. But I do think that, like, just having confidence, if you're believing in what you're selling, I think that's key. And then I think, not thinking of yourself as a woman only, but as just the best individual for whatever you're selling.
Yeah. And I also think that within creative enterprises, the key to succeeding as an executive is not specific to gender. It's about your ability to function with both sides of your brain.
Yeah.
It's the ability to speak the language to a board of directors and also be able to communicate the mandate and the brand strategy to creative people, and then to take the creative vision and be able to articulate that back to the corporate entity to help them understand, okay, this is why we need, an extra $500,000 for this. So it's not just a bunch of artists saying, oh, I want to make something beautiful. It's like you can, as an executive, you really have to be able to bridge both of those roles. And I think the most successful executives are the ones who can operate with both sides of their brain.
I think that's a really articulate, great way to put it, and I love the idea of it not being along the gender binary, but along the left-right brain binary, that being able to be conversant and fluent in both of those things. Because I think there has been a huge awareness about disparities in the workplace, and women there historically have been fewer female executives, and I think my experience is the same as yours in that regard.
So where do you think are the most opportunities for women these days in film and TV?
Anywhere
how does
and
that-
everywhere. I mean, and I'll stop talking so much, but I just have to say, this is such an exciting time right now. As a producer, everywhere I look, all I see is opportunity, and quite frankly, it's overwhelming because the demand for content is so high, and so much of my job is quite honestly just sorting through, where will my project find the best match? Because I actually don't believe in pitching. I believe in supporting our writers and our directors in their vision and really helping them understand their vision and hone that, and then that becomes a magnet for the best opportunity. And I don't want to jinx myself, but our batting average is so high because the demand for content is extraordinary at this moment. So whatever you want to do, whatever your heart's desire is, whether you're a male or a female, there's opportunity for it.
I think what you're getting at, though, is if you have passion, then your authenticity and enthusiasm comes through.
Yeah.
And other people see it, and
Yeah.
that can help you succeed.
Yeah. It's simple, but not easy.
That's it. And I think there's some specific areas due to sort of heightened attention to sort of the male-female numbers skewing so much in certain areas, as well as diversity issues that the media has helped highlight tremendously in the last couple of years. But especially for women on I'll use Outlander as an example, is that because the novel was written by a woman, because it's highly skews toward women, we thought it was important. Our showrunner felt it was important that we have equal amount of women directing as men directing, if not more. And so we specifically went out as we were getting the first year to say, let's find some strong female directors and get them in for the pilot or for this or for that. And that search was really eye-opening for us because we had some limitations in that we're shooting in a different country, and you have to get some people that, you have to have the right passport involved and all this kind of stuff. But the number of women that were on paper or with their resume reels qualified to take on a really large, big tentpole sort of show like Outlander, that number was tiny in comparison to the men. And then when we would find a few women that had the resume and the work to support, we'll hand over this really big project to you. They were, because there's only a handful of them, they're booked a year out. So we said, all right, let's look for women who maybe don't have quite that much on the resume, and let's give them a chance. It was it was a highly focused search. We continued it through season 2, and and this was some of our other shows. I know that there's other networks that are doing the same. That we started a program so that we could start having people. We used to call it a shadowing program, but now we're like, directors, orientation program, because there's negative connotations to certain shadowing. That we want to find people who may have all the bones, it's all there, they just haven't filled in all the holes, and so somebody can't hand them a big massive show, but they can get in, they can get the experience, we can get to know them, we can maybe put them on a smaller show, move them up. But the process is, if you don't take those steps to open it up, expose people, get them that experience, it's the catch-22. You can't get the show because you don't have the resume. Well, you don't have the resume because you could never get the show. And so we're trying to find ways to be in front of that and hopefully start seeing it switch, start having
But
more women.
I think that's pretty innovative. And was there any controversy or a lot of discussion around that decision to create that shadowing program?
No, my bosses were highly in favor of it. We see that even when we're trying to staff a room of writers, there just seem to be more male resumes coming to us than female resumes. And not that men can't write for women, they've been doing it for many, many decades, but you want a female voice, an organic voice, an authentic voice in your writing if you're specifically gearing it toward a particular demographic. And when we were trying to see how to staff a room and let's make sure we have equal voice male-female, that was tough. So I think it's an issue that's been recognized, and people are sort of trying to dissect where it's coming from, but I think it's up to all of us to find the ones that are still in school or still don't know that, oh, girls can do that? Like, I didn't know that was a job. I can do that? Yeah, you don't just have to work in certain areas of production. You can work in any area, and to grow that next generation. So no, my bosses were highly focused on helping with that initiative.
So not to create some controversy, but in terms of balance, Shannon, in the pre-talk, you were talking a little bit about some of your experiences where in certain situations, and you can best describe it, it's not the same experience, right?
Yeah, it's interesting, and again, unscripted, it's, we're a little bit different of an animal, and, most of the people at my company, like I said, were a lot of women, and, it's because they're the most qualified for the job. Especially a lot of the different programming that we do, like you said, having that women's voice is very important. In fact, we're doing a docuseries right now where we did all the hiring, and then we looked around and we said, our entire crew is women. Our DP, our AC, our, the whole entire gang. And we all went, wow, this is fantastic. Like, we have all these women in these roles that you don't always expect, and the whole entire crew is that. But I find what you're talking about is when we go out and pitch, quite often, if we're pitching a show with just a woman and we're not pitching it to a female network, the response is usually, is there a male counterpart? And I find that so disappointing because I'm like, but wait a minute, like we've got one with an incredibly intelligent woman who's multiple degrees, and the show is exactly in her wheelhouse. It is what she does, and everywhere we've taken her, they've all said, well, but can we team her up with a guy? And I was like, why? I don't understand. And they're like, well, we're not really sure the audience is ready just to see a woman go out and talk about that. Like, I don't understand. So there's still that frustration. So as much as behind the scenes, and even the people that we pitch to and talk to are so heavily women these days, many women, it's still that last kind of road of, well, I don't know if anybody wants to watch a woman do that. Like, why? Talk about science or talk about, something that might not be, considered a traditional women's topic. I don't know. That part's been a little bit interesting for me.
Yeah, and if you just think about the many news shows and talk shows, there are a lot of female-male or male-female combos.
Yeah.
And networks seem to like that.
Yeah, I mean, there are some networks specifically that say, well, the women just don't really work for us. Even though they might skew 50-50 in their viewership, it doesn't necessarily mean even the women want to watch just the women. So, I don't know, it's just kind of an interesting time, and I'm seeing a little bit of headway there because we've gotten now some traction with a few of those projects that are just women. But it is still tough, unless you want to go to like an Oxygen or a Lifetime that say, we're for women. It's just kind of different.
So, Amy, to put you in the spotlight for a second, in terms of turning back towards digital, why do you think, you were saying that it's a great time in the industry in digital for women, and I've heard from other places that there are a lot of women on the creative side getting into digital. Are there any lessons that we can draw from that, or is there any pattern? Why do you think that's occurring?
I just think the space, like someone said earlier, the demand is there. There's so much demand for content right now, and it's great just to see these young women coming up, and they're courageous. I mean, they're putting their stuff out there. They're writing, they're producing. They're not waiting for someone to hand them a pile of money and go make it. They're just making it on their own, and they're trying to get themselves out there, which I find really just great now, because before, there was a very traditional path that you had to go to get your material out there, and it's just not that way anymore. And, I have 2 female writer-producers that are in there right now. They did a series, 6 half hours for $10,000. And it's amazing. I watched that series and I'm like, you could not tell that this is a $10,000 series, but they did it. And they got a deal with IFC. They now have a series with ABC Digital that we're producing for them. I mean, it's just unbelievable how they went after their goals and then kind of created an opportunity for themselves. So I think that's why it's kind of exciting. And I don't think it's just for women. I think digital right now is good for any young creator, any person that wants to create. So the opportunity is there whether you're a man or a woman.
It's interesting because when I've moderated panels, particularly about YouTube and the rise of stars on YouTube, one of the characteristics that's coming out is that these young stars, they don't follow old industry traditions. And so instead of saying, well, I can't do that, it's why can't I do that? Why can't I generate this kind of audience?
I think that's more millennial than women.
Do you see in some of the other areas, not unscripted, but in some of the other areas, any lessons that we can learn about women getting more involved in the business?
I think for me, it's less about women getting more involved in business, but I think women, it's really at a certain time in life, if a woman decides to have a family, I think that to me is the bigger conversation of how women are balancing their lives as a parent with work and being able to maintain a really robust career and still have a family life that feels satisfying and fulfilling. And I feel like that's really the bigger conversation, and that I'm a mom, I have 2 kids, and my husband is extraordinary, and he's a wonderful father, and he's completely on the front lines with our kids. Whatever it is, primal, genetics, the kids always want mom. And that's, I think, the biggest challenge is that as a woman.
I'm so glad you brought that up. I feel like that's the thing that no one ever discusses.
Yeah.
And it's like the big kind of elephant in the room about this discussion, because it touches on issues of motherhood, superiority, inferiority of having kids, not having. I don't have kids. And I see a friend of mine says that at the end of every working day, a working mom should get a medal, and I think that's completely true. It's more than twice as hard. It's exponentially harder, and I think that issue is something, somehow it just doesn't get brought into this discussion of, I hope this doesn't end up.
No, not
I
at
hope
all.
internet
But I think
trolls don't end up
I think
taking me to
that
task.
raises a couple
But
of
the
really
idea of
yeah.
that as one achieves the competencies and success in one's 30s and 40s, that dovetails with biological realities, and so it's just it can be very challenging. Those 2 things can be competing forces, and I think it's a really challenging thing that doesn't get discussed very much. So I really appreciate you bringing it up.
I think we should discuss it a little bit, and there's 2 obvious questions that come to my mind. One of them is, how do you see women balancing work, a successful career, and the challenges in the work environment? I mean, and how do you think that that's different now than even 5 years ago in terms of how women are handling it?
I mean, I feel like women executives these days are way more supportive of each other than they used to be. I think, you know, the women that came before me that were, you know, in executive positions when I was starting out, I think they had a tough road to carry. I mean, they, you know, broke a glass ceiling that made it possible for me to be able to balance it a little bit better, right? And I have a fantastic partner who's always also a female mother of 2 as well. And I think you just have to, it's tough, I'm not gonna lie, it is so hard. Like when they're clinging onto you and you have guilt because you're away for a month on a, you know, in a different state and you're leaving them, and but it is really about trying to find that balance and not being too hard on yourself, I feel like, first and foremost, because I carry guilt all the time. Like I walk out the door, I'm not gonna see them tonight. It's like, it's a lot. But as a woman, like you have to be able to, my husband, it works and doesn't see them too, and I don't think he carries as much guilt as I do. I know he loves them and he's a great partner, but I don't think he carries the amount of just, you know, crushing that I feel every time I'm on FaceTime with them. But it is possible, and you are allowed to have both. That's what I think people should know as a woman, is like you are allowed to have your career and your family, and it's okay if you can't do all of it well. That's how it's supposed to be. It's too hard to do everything all well all the time.
But you're right, it's about having that right community, because I do have one child, he's 3.5, and the company that I work for is very supportive of that, and we're also supportive of everyone that does have a family. I've had women come in and interview for jobs that are visibly pregnant sitting in front of me, and I'm like, great, you're hired. You know, and they're like, really? Because I'm even afraid to go to interviews. And I'm like, it shouldn't be like that. But, you know, I think a lot of times people underestimate and think, oh, once you have a baby, then that's where all your focus goes. Because no, you actually can do both. You're not always going to do them well. But if you're in the right, community that's going to support and help you and not judge you, I think that really, and I've seen that change big time. I've worked for, like I said, a lot of different places, and I've worked for places with very negative attitudes about people with children, and I've actually had people ask me in interviews if I have children, and, you know, and give me the old, oh, well, that's not going to work, you know, because I need you to be here till 10 o'clock at night. And I've definitely seen a shift in that people know that if you're really good at what you do and you're really strong, that you can do it anytime, anywhere, any day. And whenever I do leave my office, and I still do have that guilt even sometimes when I leave early, you know, because I've got something I have to do with my son, and I'll be like, I'm going to my second job, I'll see you guys tomorrow. You know, because it really is true, it is my second job. I go to another shift after work, and but that doesn't mean that I'm not working 24/7. And when you find the people that understand that and support that, I think that's key. So you have to find the companies
But I
that
think you
support
bring
it.
up an important point, which is your own attitude. So if you approach it with confidence, your counterparts, whether they're male or female, but particularly male, they'll respect you more because they know that you've drawn a boundary. And as long as you're performing and doing your job and they know that they can count on you, that makes a big difference.
Yeah.
I would add to that I think an important key is trust and acceptance. My career, I've always been incredibly ambitious, driven, hardworking, and when I started a family, I had such difficulty, and I did not do it well because I did not trust my colleagues. I didn't trust the people around me that they could pick up when I stepped away, and I couldn't accept the fact that when they did step in, that it was going to be done differently than me. It wasn't necessarily better or worse, but it was different. And so that was a huge learning curve for me, that as a working parent, I have to trust the people around me to pick up the ball when I have to leave, and then to accept the fact that they're going to do what they're going to do, and I have to embrace that. Otherwise, it's going to collapse, because I made a lot of mistakes in that transition, and I would really come down on people when they would step in for me because I didn't feel like they were doing it the way that I wanted it done, and I just had to let that go.
I also think that the technology has gotten better to help people work more remotely and to be able to juggle multiple balls. So, you know, with a smartphone, you can actually do a lot, and you don't necessarily have to be sitting there exactly at your desk.
Yeah, and I agree with you. It's about support, because you have to we have to create the environment where it's, you know, it's part of life that people have children and that people have needs outside of work, and there's always a balance. And, you know, every life experience you have, whether it's adding children or taking care of something else, an elderly parent, and that's part of your duty, it's all sort of, you know, informing you as a human being, a human experience. Now that we're actively hiring a lot of female directors, it comes up in conversation because all the shows I'm currently working on are all overseas. when they're gone, you're gone out of your own home and your own comfort level for months at a time. And we had, directors come in and go, I have an infant child. Thank you so much. Keep me in mind for a domestic show. I was like, then we'll make that work for you. You're going to be in an apartment for 3 months anyway. Bring your partner, bring the baby. That's just like, we'll make that work. It doesn't cost, it makes you a happier, healthier, informed person to come and like, I can, work my 15-hour day and come back and at least have the luxury and the warmth of, the people who make me comfortable. So is it an extra cost? Sure. Is it worth it? Absolutely. So if you build that environment where you shouldn't think, and I know what you're saying is, oh, do you have children? Mm-hmm. And you're going, why are you asking me like that? And we're going like, do we need to get a 2-bedroom apartment or a 1? That's the reason we're asking, but that is not the case everywhere. So we have to change it. We just have to make it part of, that's what you do when you hire people that have full lives, and they'll give their full lives as an experience to your product.
So just
Thanks. No, parents. I'm only the parent of a husband and a cat, so I can barely manage them. All of you do deserve a medal.
No, but I actually find I work in a very male-dominated industry, investment banking, and I find that there are actually more guys that want to take paternity leave when their wives have kids, and they'll purposely say, I can't do this meeting or I can't do this trip because I have to do this for my family, my kids.
We have a male director on our show Girl Boss who said our production went a little bit longer than we anticipated. And he said, my twin's birthday is on Tuesday. He's like, I can't come in until 10:30. He's like, so you're just gonna have to shift the production schedule because I have to be there for my twins to wake them up and give them their, and I was like, wow, that's so awesome. Yeah. And our answer was, yes, of course.
Yeah.
So just shifting gears a little bit, we haven't really talked much about differences in international for film and TV versus U.S. domestic. Do you see differences in international in terms of the opportunities or the work environment for women compared to the U.S.?
I don't know that I can speak to that in the official capacity, but I think internationally there are still very challenging issues of racial disparity and our kind of hoped for and multicultural productions, of which we're all proud, and that's part of, hopefully, at least in my opinion, part of the American experience, is not an ethos that's always shared overseas, and that can be a hard thing in terms of foreign sales for independent films, because it's not an expectation and sometimes perceived as a, how can I say this politely, perceived as making a project less valuable. Projects that are particularly racially balanced or have that an element of aspects of racial stories and communities in the United States don't travel well. There's a perception of that. I don't know if gender is, in my experience, it hasn't been as much of an issue.
I agree.
I will say it's been equally as hard to find directors, female directors, on one side of the pond as the other. So I think they're having the same challenges and hopefully having the same sort of, revolution as let's get them in the business.
And we touched on this with the prior question on opportunities in creative for women, but given how traditional film and TV is undergoing a disruptive transformation into digital, what are the biggest impacts that you see on content, and is that creating any rippling effect, again, for opportunities for women?
I would say, just as Amy said, like that it is absolutely, and that, if you can make a great film with your iPhone, I don't know if anybody saw Tangerine, a film, again, I had nothing to do with, but, that was really an extraordinary, piece of work made on an iPhone. And so the idea of people just kind of rolling up their sleeves and generationally, regardless of gender, just saying this is the story I have to tell, I think is a really exciting, just the simple economic barrier to entry being lowered to effectively zero because you already have a smartphone, as opposed to, 20 years ago, having to be able to afford to get your film developed at the lab and have expensive equipment to edit it and all of those kinds of things. All those barriers have basically approached zero, which also means there's a lot of content being made for which there are uncertain audiences. There may not be an audience for it, but as the old cliche goes, cream will rise, and people, content that is worth watching will find its audience. And so I think it's very exciting, and that regardless of age, even that people of any, I would love to see older people making films, in indie films that they might not have made, or tweens making films they might not have made. There's just a huge amount of opportunity to tell stories that are unique to specific communities and don't necessarily need gigantic audiences. And Tangerine is certainly an example of that. It's a world I would know absolutely nothing about based on my life experience, but I feel like it's a privilege to watch that film and be momentarily transported to a world that I wouldn't otherwise have access to, and that's the exciting thing to me about the technology.
Although you might think, going back to traditional biases, that women are not as good at tech, at understanding tech. And I don't know if you see that as any kind of barrier, or whether it's more millennials are so facile with the latest technology that sort of trumps everything.
Millennials are definitely better at it than I don't know if that has anything to do with gender. I think that's just an age thing. It's like, I still can't figure out Snapchat.
I also think I think Karen touched upon it too. I think it starts earlier. It starts when the kids are in school, and I'm sure you guys are part of a lot of different organizations in entertainment where they all want to go and do galas and they want to talk about like mentoring programs. But really, by the time you've graduated college and you're set, like you have your behaviors and your ideas of what you can and cannot accomplish. And I think that as a society, we need to focus on the younger generation and like really give them those opportunities, make them feel like they're empowered to do whatever they want to do, make them feel empowered that they're as equal as any man. And so just whether it's tech, whether it's medicine, whether it's entertainment, like I think that's where it really needs to start. And I wish there were more organizations that were focusing on underprivileged areas and high school, even elementary, and focus on that as opposed to everything else. Like, because once they've hit this community, it's a little too late, in my opinion. But whoops.
And one of the interesting areas that I think we're seeing is adjacent sectors like gaming, and the mix between gaming and film and TV to some extent. Does anyone want to give a couple examples of where they've seen really successful shows come out of that, and whether or not it's harder with gaming, because people think of gaming as a traditionally male-oriented sector, except for the parlor games and the iPad games, but how there could be differences in marketing to a female audience?
Well, our company was involved in a video game that it was a Microsoft exclusive video game called Quantum Break. And the idea was that there is a female gaming audience. The game was unique in that it was truly interactive, where the player would make decisions as the villain at the end of each segment, and then you were allowed to watch a half-hour television show, and we produced the television show. So I think, yes, there is an opportunity. There is an audience in the female world for gaming, and I think that people are starting to understand that and kind of program to that, because the gaming audience is fanatic. It doesn't matter if it's male or female. They love any side of video game.
We can't, especially with the last debate occurring tonight, we can't leave without some reference to the presidential election, and not to get into political views, but this year's election has put a lot of focus on having a woman in the most powerful position in government, running the biggest country in the world. And it's, I think, raised a provocative question that can be applied to many fields, including film and TV, which is, how much focus do you think should be on the candidate or the executive as a woman versus that person's qualification for a job?
I think all of it should be on their qualifications for the job.
Yeah.
And I think there are a lot of extraordinarily, the discussion is important about bringing attention to disparities, but I think the discussion has helped bring to light the fact of just how many competent people there are in the world, and many of whom are women. And so I think that the kind of historic biases and the kind of cultural idea of the frat house, of corporations as frat house where women don't have a place, I think that has hugely shifted as the role of fatherhood, as you already pointed out, has shifted, and as, and even male-dominated cultures at work seem to have yielded to a larger cultural sensibility about the importance of family in general and acknowledging that employees, as you said, have a life outside of work. And so that the idea of just the most competent person, to me seems far more important.
But do you think what do you think are some effective strategies for dealing with that, I would say misperception? Like the easy bias to put the focus on the person being a woman or a female versus the qualifications for the job?
I don't know exactly how to answer that, but I feel like we were talking about this earlier, that we all have bias, and it's either, it's unspoken, spoken, we either acknowledge it within ourselves or we don't. And I feel like I've always led with a bias towards my education, like where I went to undergrad, that I have an MBA, that I'm intelligent, that I'm creative, that I won awards. And I feel like the fact that I'm a woman and that I'm diversity, I'm half Asian, has always been like 11th and 12th on the list. And I had been at CBS for 8 years, and the CEO came to me one day and he's like, hey, why didn't you ever tell us that you were Asian? Because I can get points for that. And I was like, it's just not important to my ability in terms of doing this job. And so I don't know what the answer is, but I just feel like individually, the way that we show up in the world, the choices that we make, you can show up as a woman, you can show up as a man, you can show up as black, you can show up as white, or you can show up as something else. And that's a choice that you get to make. And people are either going to respond to that or not, but you don't have any control over that. But you do have control over what you want to lead with. And so that's where I feel like we can take a stand for empowerment as opposed to being powerless.
Well, that's actually the first time I've heard that you get points for being Asian, but let's go beyond that.
I would say I agree with that, and I think it's just how a person of any gender treats their colleagues. That women can be terrible to each other also, just like men can be terrible to women, they can be terrible to each other. I mean, it's just like all those lines can be antagonistic or they can be nurturing and supportive. And so, the cultural habit that women can have of gossiping, choosing not to do that. They're just choosing to create the corporate, or it doesn't have to be corporate, choosing to create the professional culture you want to work in by your own choices, I think is what I would advise. Like, if women are saying, how do I get ahead? How do I make a place for myself here? It's like, but lead by example of creating the culture that you want to be part of, which is one that's supportive and where competence and education do rise.
I have a friend, just a really quick story, a director, and she had the opportunity to sign with 2 big agencies recently. And one of the agencies, their pitch to her was, there's so much diversity hiring right now. There's such a demand for female directors, and we think that you're so well positioned. The other agency, which was smaller, said, we love your work. We think you're extraordinary. And she was really torn. It's like, do I go with the larger, more established agency that wants to push me as a diversity hire, or do I go with the smaller agency that just loves my work? And I was a gigantic advocate for go with the smaller agency. Don't lead with the fact that you're a diversity hire, that you're a woman. It's like, you're so much, this is going to sound obnoxious, but you're so much better than that. It's like, you are a director. You're not a female director. You are a director.
So who did she choose?
She went with my advice.
And has it worked out so far?
I'm sorry?
Has it worked out so far?
It's such a recent signing. Just literally happened within the last couple of months.
No, that's great. How important has mentoring been in your career? Because I hear that a lot in terms of, and that actually applies to not just to female, male, but I think for many females, mentoring has been an important element of success. How has it played a role in any of your careers that you feel comfortable sharing?
Well, I think everybody needs a mentor no matter what avenue you go to. And I mean, I started my career in entertainment as a producer, so I was an independent producer, you know, trying to put $5 together to do a movie, to get the next movie, to get the next movie. And every now and again, you'll get those lovely, you know, altruistic people who come in and just tell you what's what, you know, no barriers, no this, let me tell you the honest truth, this is really hard, let me tell you why, and, you know, shadow me or do whatever it is. Every mentor I've had has been a man. So, because there weren't any women there to mentor in the job that I wanted. So that's gonna change, it will. But I think mentorship is very important, but don't make it gender specific. It should be who can offer you that information on the job that you're seeking, and mentor for the job you want, not the job that, you know, maybe you have right now, you want to get better. Go for the job you want and learn from any avenue that you can get.
Yeah, no, that's great advice.
I've had so many awesome advocates in my career, knock on wood, people that would put me up for jobs or give me recommendations. I've sadly never had a mentor, which is why I'm a gigantic advocate for coaching. So I went and hired my own mentor, that person who would say to me, you know what, you're crossing the line, or, you know, that's full of, you know, you're bullshit. That's just like, that's crazy. And I feel like the great mentors are the ones who do call you on that stuff. And I think you need both. And I still pay for someone to give me that kind of good advice.
No, that's good. You feel like you're getting your money's worth, right?
Yeah.
It seems to have worked out.
Are there any particular organizations that you feel are good for women, particularly young women in film and TV, to get involved in, where they might be able to find, you know, an element of mentoring or just have effective networking?
Well, I mentioned the Gina Davis Institute earlier because they just bring a lot of attention to this, just the whole idea of disparity, and they do it from a perspective of social science, really, like, not just, oh, I feel like there are fewer women on screen. They actually have graduate students quantifying the number of extras in the background of, you know, television, and putting real hard data to this narrative in hopes of changing the narrative. So I think that's one. There's women in film. I'm not a member of Women in Motion Picture Services, but there's something called WIMPs, which is meant to be quite good, of more production-oriented, like crew-oriented. So those would be the three that I would recommend. Two are more general, professional, and then WIMPs is more production, gig-oriented.
Let's open it up to questions from the audience. This woman right here.
Hi, so I want to go back to something that Karen Bailey had said, and for the entire panel. I want to know what you wanted to be when you were younger, and how you got into this business by segueing what you wanted to be when you grew up, and how your choice to enter into the business wherever it was to start led you to where you are now.
I'll start with because it changes, and you're right. It's got to start in school. It's got to start much younger. But I didn't know, coming from not LA or New York and not really having a grasp on thing. I knew I wanted to be in entertainment. Didn't know how, didn't know what. And the only thing that was easily applicable was like, oh, well, go be in a play, go be in entertainment. And then I went to school thinking I was going to be a psychiatrist and started studying all that stuff, and then went to an audition, got a play, and then, oh, wait, they'll pay you for this, and then got a scholarship for drama school. So I went through school as a drama major because, like, okay, this is getting me closer. Graduated and moved to Los Angeles, just like, nobody's going to stop me. Okay, I got a path. And you go, and so what you have is this degree in what you've known from wherever you are in the United States, not being LA or New York, and jump into it. And I was working and making a living as an actor for a while, but then kept looking at all these other people going, well, what's that person do? Well, what does that person do? Well, that person gets to make decisions. What does she do or he do? And then it started going into that, and then teaching, finding the mentors, going in, saying, you know what, Kevin Smith can make a movie, I can make a movie, and you go make a movie, and it's really hard, and you have to learn partial legal, and so you focus on what you want. So it's always been one job description led to the other, which is why I'm so, I'm a big advocate of saying we got to let people know those jobs exist. I didn't know what a producer did. I didn't even know this job existed. So it was a long path to get there, but I think you get in, you find out where you click, what drives you, what absolutely drives you. And then, I fell in from being an independent producer to being asked to work in a studio capacity, from a studio capacity to a network capacity. So it was just this natural migration. So I don't think you ever know where you're going to end up, but I think you have to find what you absolutely go, I want to do that. And it may be your digital job that doesn't exist. The job some of you want may not exist yet, but it will in 5 years, and you'll be in front of it. So that's
And
a root
how
of it.
how long did it take you to get what you considered to be your first break?
As an independent producer, as many of you, the first break is getting somebody to agree to fund you. I mean, that is, everything about producing is hard, but getting the money, to anybody tell me if you feel differently, that's the hardest.
Yeah.
That is the hardest, because you got to get that going. So the first big break is the first investor that said, I'll put in a little bit of money. That script looks funny. What do you know? Don't try not to lose me any money. And then that movie won 40 film festivals and did really well, and that gets you your next one. So the first big break is that, but then also finding those people that you can hopefully trust to show you the ropes. Because if you're a producer and you ask another producer to help you, you could end up being their competition one day. And they may not want to help you. And there were a lot of people that didn't want to help you, that send you off in other ways. And then you find that person that goes, ugh, I'm too old for that. Come here, follow me, shadow me, be here at 7 a.m. I'm going to show you the ropes. Whatever division you're in. So I think you have to find those people that will help you get to that next step and be willing to just roll up your sleeves and learn.
Yeah.
So I'd actually like to hear from each of the panelists their story. Shannon?
Gosh. The job I have really didn't exist when I was growing up either. I mean, unscripted television, outside of, documentaries, but, it wasn't really a thing then. And I actually got my start. I just knew I wanted to work in television from when I was very, very little. I loved everything. I was a voracious TV watcher, much to my parents' horror. I watched everything. I loved all the genres. I really wanted to learn about it. I was interested in acting. I was interested in directing. I wanted to do all of it. And then I got into news writing, and I fell in love with doing that because it was just that daily deadline. And I did similar look around. I'm like, what does that person do? I started at the bottom working in a dispatch shack, listening to police radio scanners, waiting to hear murders from midnight to 8 a.m. was my first job. And, within a year or two, I was writing the 6 o'clock news where I lived, which was Minneapolis. So it was, decent market. And I just kept going from there. But I found as I was working in hard news, which is a really hard thing to work in for an extended period of time, I was always sneaking looks at the old People magazine and really interested in what the celebrities were doing and what was happening in Hollywood. And I was interested in the business of Hollywood more than anything. And I, on a whim, this was a long time ago, called Human Resources at E! Entertainment Television and got a job, which nobody can do anymore. I don't even know if that even exists anymore. And they found me to be quite a comical character because I was, this Minneapolis girl that just couldn't wait to come to LA. And they hired me to produce all the live red carpet shows for Joan Rivers and Melissa Rivers back in the late 90s when the red carpet was first really getting going. And I just was absolutely, again, just enamored with the business. I loved it. And I moved from that on to doing other shows at E! And then the unscripted boom really started, and I thought, well, that also is really interesting. How do you get into that? And I left E! to start, I worked at Big Brother in one of its early seasons, and I did the live shows for Big Brother. And then from there, it just kind of went, and I just went from unscripted to unscripted to unscripted, and ended up on the production company side about 4 years ago after being a showrunner for about 12 years. So, and it's completely different now on this side of the business. It feels very different from being a showrunner. It was much more like, being a cowboy compared to now, some more adult, showrunner and, overseeing a company. But yeah, that was really what it was. I was always enamored with TV, and in anything I got into, I was always looking, going, well, what's that job, and how can I do that? And finding those people that would, like you said, a lot of people don't necessarily want to show you all their secrets, but every now and again you meet one that goes, hey kid, you I like. And that's what happened with me in all these different positions. Somebody would say, hey, come over here for a second and I'll show you how this works. And you just, if you believe in yourself and you're confident and you just, just don't lose sight of it, and be kind along the way. That's really what worked for me, so.
Laverne?
I used to write and produce educational films in Chicago, but I always wanted to work in entertainment, so I moved to LA. I was an assistant at an agency, and that led to a job at Klasky Csupo, the animation company that does Rugrats, and that led to the job at CBS, where I was there for 10 years and just had a great run until the day I was fired, and then that was not fun anymore. And I went to work with Mike Newell, ran television for him, and then Epix called, and it was the opportunity to start up a new programming department for a brand new premium cable network, and that was awesome. I did that for a couple of years, and then I went back to producing independently, and I've been with Charlize now for about 2.5 years. But I think to sort of answer like the core question, it wasn't until probably like 6 or 7 years ago that I figured out why I was doing this, which is my mission, my purpose, my passion in life is to help people heal. And I really believe in the power of storytelling to do that, to bring communities together, for people to see themselves and recognize themselves and see their own heartache, and to heal that. And so I'm so deeply connected to that passion and that purpose now, and I feel like as a producer I get to do that in a way that I never got to do in any of my other jobs.
It's great. Karen?
Like everyone here, I've had sort of a winding path as well. When I went to college and I was a history major, and I thought I was going to be a lawyer. In my senior year, I realized I would be like the worst lawyer ever. And I sort of had this crisis of like, well, now what am I going to do? But it was the early days of the independent film world, and I grew up in a small town, and so the idea of like being an artist or a creator was something that was just completely unfamiliar. Like it was like people were not employed to do that where I came from. And so the idea that you could make films that had a voice of their own, and that portrayed very specific cultures, not just Hollywood and huge kind of mainstream films, was really exciting to me. So I moved to San Francisco, and the only jobs at the time there were in post-production. And I also realized I was not good in post-production either. This is the beginning of the digital thing, and I was like, I am not going to be in a dark room with computers. Like, I am not good at this. And so it was a slow attrition of things that I was not good at. Realizing, though, but at the core of all of it was always storytelling and just being curious and finding a way to be, to use an interest in storytelling and research, as somebody had mentioned, and sort of weaving together disparate elements to create a project is something that I realized I'd been doing since I was a kid, and that is interesting to me, whether you're building a treehouse when you're a kid or, and somebody said to me, like, what's producing? With this sort of vague kind of implication that clearly you're not the person with the money, which is what I always get. But to me, it's like people say, like, being a mom is producing. I mean, it's making something that happened that wasn't otherwise happening. And I realized that isn't otherwise and wouldn't otherwise happen. And that's what I realized drives me and what I care about. And that's the thread I started to follow. And I think it can take many different paths, as everyone here has acknowledged.
I grew up in Georgia, and obviously my parents are immigrants. Honestly, the arts never even crossed my mind because I grew up thinking I was supposed to be a doctor. But, in college, I don't know, I always grew up, and like everyone else here, I loved anything about movies and television. I would watch Sound of Music from the time I was like 2 on a rewind. But so I don't know. There was a switch in me. We had a little bit of a family crisis where I reevaluated my life, thankfully, when I was 16, and it was great because honestly, it gave me that push to go after what I really wanted to do, which was to do the arts. So I came out to Los Angeles, and I would never tell anybody to do what I did because I came out completely unprepared, unresearched, was just like, I'm gonna get a job. And I started in the crew side, and I was a television coordinator for a lot of years, for about 7 years, mostly at Warner Brothers, and then was very lucky enough to make a transition as a paid producer working for Nickelodeon for 4 or 5 years, and then made the switch as the head of production for Michael Eisner's digital studio, Vugaru, which is where I met my partner. And so my journey's been kind of, like, it was more like survival. Like, I had to make money, and I had to have a job. But, and it's interesting to hear you guys talk about mentors, because, like, if a mentor fell in my lap, great. But I always had to act like I knew what I was doing and then figure it out on my own most times. So, but I wouldn't change it for the world, because like every job, when it was scary, I knew that was the right time to make a switch and to go after that job. And even this company, like starting out on your own and building a company is frightening, leaving a salary job to go and make your own thing. But, again, my partner and I, wonderful person, like we were able to put this together, follow our passions. And now we're able to kind of make what inspires us and what we believe in. So it's been a good journey so far.
Okay, so long answers, but a truly great question. We have another question here.
Thank you.
First of all, thank you for telling us your leadership stories. I think those stories help to bring context to who you are. And we evolve, particularly I think as women. You know, we're not who we were a year ago, 10 years ago, 20 years, not yesterday. So what word, if you can think of just one word, describes where you are right now? From each of you.
We're going to start with Amy this time and work down that way. Sorry.
No, that's fine. I would say I'm happy. Sorry, Karen.
Reasonably optimistic. It's 2 words.
But she was going to be a lawyer, so she gets 2 words. Okay.
Fulfilled.
Fortunate.
That's a good one. I'd say inspired.
That's great. A question here?
I was wondering if any of you ladies knew about funds or grants aimed towards female filmmakers?
Women in Film has a lot of resources in that regard, and I don't mean this to sound patronizing, but there's, like, if you research on the internet, let's just say, if you Google search, there's tons of, there are grants, you know, do you have an access? Australia, because like the Australian Film Commission is extraordinary, and so is the Canadian Film Commission. Both of them are really remarkable resources where taxpayers of those countries actually pay into funds to help, you know, their fellow country people become artists. But there are, you know, most of the festivals, Tribeca, Sundance, Film Independent, several AFI, thank you, all have sort of adjunct programs to create, as you have at your company, you know, resources and whether they're labs, workshops, seminars, mentorship, you know, to connect young female filmmakers with resources they need. So I would encourage you just to do a lot of your own research, and it will yield a lot of resources. I would caution you against, there's also a lot of bottom feeding about, like, pay us $300 and we'll read your script. And I personally feel like if you kind of go with the brand identity names of, again, Sundance, Tribeca, AFI, these kind of larger institutes that have dedicated themselves as arts organizations over decades, that's probably your best area to be searching.
And
Yeah,
use
so
the
don't do the
$300 to
pay for play.
Well, I was going to say use the $300 to just make your film.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
don't give it to anybody else. I mean, you know.
Okay, 2 more quick questions. The woman here, and then we'll go here.
Hi. This question is really kind of on behalf of any of you over 40 creatives in the room, because you brought up motherhood. And
No one's over 40 here.
yeah, motherhood, I mean, if I'm honest, it really slowed me down, and that's okay. I'm not complaining about it. I made my choices and whatever, but it slowed me down. And so I used that time a lot to create, you know, develop myself as an artist and do stuff independently. I loved the digital world. It helped me, you know, do a lot of things. But now, my daughter's 14, and I feel like I'm ready to fly. I feel like I'm more creative than I've ever been when I was 20. More disciplined, more ready to not take things personally. But there's all these programs for the young ones to break in, and I think that's fantastic. But I'm just wondering, is there programs for us to help sort of meet the, you know,
Yeah, so your question is, what's your best entry point?
yeah, how do you, because there's the ages that everyone tells me, don't even tell them your age, you know, all that stuff.
What's your area of focus? Are you a director, writer?
I'm a writer-director.
Writer-director.
Oh my God, and Meryl Streep in New York, you should just Google it, over 40 women writers. There's never been a better time to be over 40 and a woman and a writer.
Yeah, that's through New York Women in Film and Television, which is another great organization. Yeah.
If I could just say, Ms. Tenkoff, you've mentioned it a couple times, I am a member of Women in Film, and I am a director-writer. I've only been doing it for a few years, and they have been an amazing support team with mentoring, they have great programs, they just really take care. So, thank you for mentioning that, I'll be sure to let them know.
Okay, so I did promise this woman in front one last question.
I'd love to hear your experience when you're pitching a new project. Just some tips about how you do what you come in with. Do you a one sheet? Do you memorize it? When you're talking to networks versus cable versus maybe the Hulu and Amazons, do you vary what you're saying? I'm sure we all.
So we're going to do the speed dating version of
And you mean specifically for
Pitch
television,
tips.
right? Or are we talking about specifically television? Great. It helps
television.
limit the question. It helps limit the answers.
I don't think there's a difference, honestly. I think the buyers are all the same now. So, personally, I don't like to go in with a one sheet just because then the person's looking down at the sheet and they're not listening to you. I don't like to read because, you have to believe in your product to exude confidence if you're reading off of a page. It's just a perception thing with the person that you're sitting across from. So for me, I don't, whether it's television, whether it's, cable, whether it's digital, it's all the same. There's, a lot of the digital execs now are coming from the cable and traditional network places. So, they all speak the same language, but for me, key is confidence. I mean, if you're selling something and if you're not confident, why would they buy it?
Yeah, and the confidence comes from, there's a distinction between the development of your project versus the pitch. So it's really, really important to actually fully develop your project and know who your characters are, what their journeys are, know what your seasons are, break it down. And when I work with a writer, sometimes that can be 40 or 50 pages of material, and then we'll actually then craft a pitch from that material that's only 7 or 8 pages, because I don't like to pitch anything that's more than roughly 20 minutes.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Well, thank you all for staying. Let's give our panelists a round of applause.
Thank you.